Good morning. This is Jeremy Thatcher, Dragon Hatcher. I hope your dental appointment went well today, Ellie. You still have one missing front tooth, or did he pull out that other one? Probably didn't. Chapter 4 is Hyacinth Priest. I have no idea. Hyacinth is a kind of a flower. A priest is kind of like a minister, but I don't know. Jeremy stared at the direction sheet. The top of the page had changed. Where it had once read, how to hatch a dragon's egg, it now said, the care and feeding of dragons. When had it changed? And how? Fingers trembling, he picked up the paper. The dragon tickled his ear with its tongue as he began to read. The care and feeding of dragons. You have been chosen to care for a rare and precious creature, Jeremy Thatcher. When fully grown, your dragon will be unimaginably powerful. But in the early stages of its development, it's very vulnerable. Like any infant, it must be cared for if it is to survive. To begin with, you must guard the fact of its existence. The world at large does not love dragons. Should your dragon be discovered, it will almost certainly be taken from you. As to feeding, while mature dragons prefer live food, an infant will be satisfied with something that's already been killed. Small goblets of meat, such as chicken livers, are particularly appropriate. When the dragon's older, it will be able to hunt for itself. Dragons grow rapidly, so you will need to think about protecting your pets before long. Eventually, your dragon will shed its skin. Do not be alarmed by this. However, you must save the skin, as well as the baby teeth, which will begin to fall out at about the same time. You must also save as much of the eggshell as possible. These things will be very important when midsummer night arrives. Your dragon must have a name. Actually, every dragon's born with a name. However, since these birth names must remain secret, you should provide another name as soon as possible. Finally, your dragon will be very sensitive to your own emotional state. It will be wise to avoid extreme agitation while raising the dragon. If you do not, trouble may result. It's a good thing Mom and Dad sleep late on Saturdays, thought Jeremy as he tiptoed into the kitchen. Opening the refrigerator, he stared inside. Suddenly, he became aware of something big and furry standing next to him. "Grief," he whispered. "Get out of here." The golden retriever looked up at him with a wounded expression. However, if the dog was wounded, he was not offended enough to leave. Leaning against Jeremy, he stared into the refrigerator. Boy and dog moved their heads in unison as they scanned the lower shelves, which were filled with plastic containers. Jeremy knew that most of them held stuff like leftover rice pudding, but he knew too that there must be some chicken livers here. His father ate them all the time. Gathering his courage, he pulled open the meat tray. There they were. Jeremy shivered as he pulled the container out of the refrigerator. "Gross," he moaned when he opened it and actually saw the chunks of slippery purple meat. How can Dad even touch these things, he thought, much less eat them? His revulsion was multiplied when he felt something wet on his bare foot and looked down to find Grief was drooling on him. Jeremy shook his foot. The gob of slobber spread out a bit, but otherwise stayed in place. He pulled a paper towel from the roll sitting on the counter and bent down to wipe away the dog's spit. "You make me sick," he hissed at Grief. The dog licked his face. Totally disgusted, Jeremy pulled one of the chicken livers out of the container and threw it across the room. Grief ran after it with such lust that he smashed into a cupboard. "What's going on down there?" Jeremy flinched. Just giving Grief his breakfast, Dad," he yelled, hoping his dad to be too groggy to remember that it had been months since he'd voluntarily fed the dog. "Well, do it a little more quietly," shouted Dr. Thatcher. "Some people are still sleeping around here." "Oh, okay, Dad. Sorry about that." Jeremy waited, but there were no more words from upstairs. He relaxed. His father must have collapsed back into sleep. Walking on tiptoe, he led Grief outside and clipped his collar to the chain attached to the corner of the garage. He slipped back inside, gently pulling the door closed behind him. That was better. He would never get these things upstairs with Grief around. Back at the counter, Jeremy pulled out 2 more livers. Ugh, they feel as bad as they look. Quivering with disgust, he dropped the cold meat onto a saucer, then put the container back into the fridge. Picking his way through the cats, he shut the kitchen door and started up the stairs. When he entered his room, the dragon was nowhere to be seen. Where did it go? He thought desperately. As he was heading for his desk, he heard a soft hissing. Looking up, he saw the dragon swooping toward him, its pointy red wings stretched to the full. Yow! Cried Jeremy, jumping back. The dragon landed on the edge of the saucer and began to nip at one of the livers. Jeremy held the saucer at arm's length. You, he said to the dragon, are a troublemaker, and you have bad taste. But as he set the saucer down, with the dragon still clinging to the edge, Jeremy again found himself entranced by the strange beauty of the little beast. When the dragon was done eating, it walked across the desk and began to climb Jeremy's arm. Its tiny claws felt like needles against his skin. Ouch! Cried Jeremy. Cut that out! The dragon ignored his protest. It continued up his arm until it reached his shoulder, where it settled down with a little sigh that sent a puff of hot air across his cheek. Jeremy slid the saucer aside and pulled the instruction sheet out of the desk drawer. Your dragon must have a name, he read aloud. He reached up to pat the little fella, which had curled up on his shoulder. What about it, beastie? He asked softly. What should we call you? To his surprise, the dragon answered him.